The working title of this video is the need to engage the story in order to dissolve the story. Now, when I started practicing meditation, I remember I first went on, when I took meditation seriously, and I went on my first 10-day meditation retreat, a very important instruction was illuminated by the teacher, S.N Goenka, on this retreat. And he said, and it always stands out to me, as it is, not as you would like it to be. And this is me adding to it. So basically, be with experience as it is, nothing more, nothing less. Don't add anything, because any mental gymnastics your mind adds to anything is what creates suffering in the first place. So essentially, another analogy might be something like this. Our mind is this tight little box that we conceive of our identity being. Like, here's Sam, he's in this little neat box here. And anything that occurs in this box, say like thoughts, if we're in this tight little box our whole life and we keep on playing in the game in the realm of thoughts within it, if we let go of that and there's infinite consciousness beyond that, which is actually experienceable, call it infinite consciousness, call it a mind that is unbound by thoughts, just very empirically, like we're not engaging in the story anymore, then we're released from the story. So let's say we then have a feeling of quote unquote sadness, but what if we don't add the label of sadness to it and we just feel the raw, bare sensations of pressure, heat, but you wouldn't even call it pressure and heat because that's another mental label, right? This is Vipassana meditation at its core. And doesn't just have to be with S.N Goenka's technique. There's so many other ways, like there's mental noting, but again, I guess that's adding a label, but Vipassana is just bare experience, as I've come to know it. So the invitation with Vipassana is to let go of the story. Don't stop engaging it. That's what's causing suffering. So on my first retreat, I remember going to this and hearing this instruction. And even prior, like you hear it in, like I used Headspace for a bit, the Headspace app, and things like Waking Up with Sam Harris. Use that for a bit. And even they say in it, just watch your mind. There's clouds passing by in the sky. There might be a thought, in relation to thought, all that. And that's sort of like Vipassana, but I would say it's a more high level, it doesn't really go to the bare bones of what it is. It's just like a superficial thing, which is very useful. Like, not shunning that, but yeah. And I took that instruction as it is, not as I would like it to be. And I remember trying to take that out into daily life. And if I reflect back, so this is about December 2019, I did my first Vipassana retreat. And then I took it into the workplace, into daily life. And at the time I was working as a cardiac technician. I'd just finished university, my biomedical science degree, and I went to uni. So I went to the workplace after my retreat, and I'm like, okay, I'm going to apply this technique as it is, not as I would like it to be. And I would be, like walking around, and I would have these like small little windows where it was, I was just allowing whatever was arising in experience to surface. But if I'm being really honest, probably 95% of that time, if I really remember, was just suffering. Like, here I was aware of my experience at a really deep level, but I was just suffering like a motherfucker, man. Like, just so much stuff was surfacing. Repressed emotions, feelings. So here I am, I'm like, okay, S.N Goenka says, as it is, not as I would like it to be. And there's a lot of truth in that. And the way my mind was sort of justifying the pursuit of that, the equanimity chase, I guess you could say, was I'm building a muscle here, and I'm training the reflexivity of mind to be able to not react. So if I can continue to just push through this and see clearly, this is just, heat, pressure, tingling. But then at the same time, I'm feeling tremendous anxiety, and I just kept getting walloped by it. It was just too much to deal with in daily life. It was very difficult for me to be with the bare sensation, as it was. So I did another retreat, another 10-day retreat shortly after, because I'm like, okay, I know that I've got to work toward this equanimity thing. So I did another retreat. I'm like, okay, I'm just going to go gung-ho and get this thing right, because there's just so much suffering in my experience. And it helped. But I think what it ended up doing was just bring up even more repressed emotion. And again, my mind really started to attach itself to this idea of like, you know what? I need to get this right. I need to get this Vipassana thing right. So I did another retreat and I served as a male manager this time. Although if I could have sat as a student, I would have. And the same thing. Equanimity was still really challenging. Now, mechanistically, I now know and I can see more clearly what was actually happening. But my mind wasn't willing to go there in the moment, basically, which it took a lot of suffering to be able to actually probe into the beliefs and the hardware of my mind to see what was actually happening. And that still unravels to this day. But fundamentally, anytime we have any unpleasantness in our experience, our mind has this inbuilt mechanism that says no to everything, basically. At a very deep level, it's just saying no to everything. And I'm starting to see that more. I've heard Angelo DeLulo and other people talk, Ajay Shanti's talked about this, and they've talked about what they find is that the deeper people go into realization and going into subtler and subtler levels of experience, is that that's what the selfing mechanism is. It's basically just creates separation by saying no to everything. And I don't know if I can honestly say to you that I've truly tapped into that, although I'm inclined to look there so often now that I see what they mean. But it's essentially like, if I have an unpleasant emotion, even if I'm saying like, okay, I'm with this as it is, not as I'd like it to be. This is what Sam was doing after his first and second and third retreat even. And sometimes still now. There's an unpleasant emotion and it's like, I'm saying, as it is, I'm just going to be with this barely, this sensation just as it is. But actually the mechanism that's underlying that is there's resistance. There's like, no, I don't want to feel this. But then there's like, but I'm just going to be with it, right? But the resistance isn't collapsing to allow that emotion to move through. Even though I'm like, as it is, as it is, as it is. Oh yeah, equanimity, right? This is equanimity. But meanwhile, I'm suffering. And it's so paradoxical, but there is a movement that you can even allow in resistance. You can be like, yes, okay, I can see my mind is resisting everything. Can I be okay with the fact that my mind is resisting everything? And that in and of itself is equanimity. But I remember if I had heard that, I'm like, even after my third retreat, I'm like, no, this isn't it. Like, I'm just suffering too much. There's just too much going on. So that enters the equation of emotion work. And this is really weird to talk about because there's some people, and I know because I actually did this, is you can form this identity around being this like meditator, this Vipassana meditator who has to like not engage the story. Don't think, exactly as I described in the start, like stop engaging the thoughts in this little tight box of our identity. Because what you're doing is you're just engaging like delusion basically, and you're setting yourself up you're shooting yourself in the foot by doing that. Even though it feels like you're doing the right thing, it's like, it's delusion. And that's what we're trying to get out of. that's like what the spiritual or like hardcore Vipassana meditator might say. But, and I was one of those people for a while. But I know now, just speaking from my experience, this may not be for every Vipassana meditator, but I know now that identity was basically desperately trying to attach itself to being a Vipassana meditator and using this technique so that it could essentially justify its pursuit of the Vipassana meditation technique and cling on to it. If I just get it, if I just one day get it right, then I'll stop suffering. So it was like holding so tightly to that belief and mechanism of being a Vipassana meditator that it was like, if I let go of that, then I'm fucked. Like, I'm screwed. Because I know there's power in this thing of equanimity. Like, I got to get equanimity. And so I can't let go of Vipassana. So if anyone else says to engage this story, there's something a bit off about that and I shouldn't do it. And that's exactly what I did. And I'm telling you, I just kept suffering. And I did it for like 3 years. So you could argue that I could have kept practicing Vipassana and eventually it would have dawned on me that I'm resisting experience. But without doing the shadow work, I don't know. I don't know if I could have. Now, mechanistically, I want to talk about how shadow work has helped me, because I think if you are one of these people, if you're like me, things have shifted significantly for me now. But if you were like me, or you are like me, when I was in that stage, you might want to hear this. And it's pretty sticky. No matter this doesn't even apply to Vipassana, but it applies to any school of meditation, really. It's like a lot of schools tell you to not engage the mind. So even like Ramana Maharishi, who am I? Or Vipassana meditation, be with it as it is, not as you would like it to be, essentially. The core mechanisms, they're like, any thought really is just sort of, and I know you can get into the nuance of, like, say Vipassana doesn't say this specifically, but stop engaging thoughts and stories, basically, is what I'm getting at. So if we introduce emotion work into the cauldron of this thing, this like spiritual path that we're on, it's kind of almost like taboo in a way. And it's scary. Let's say you've been doing Vipassana for like 10 years and now someone's telling you to do emotion work. It's like, I have faith, I've read all these books on Vipassana. I'm not letting go of this identity that I'm the Vipassana meditator. But, meanwhile, if you're still suffering a lot, if you're being really honest with yourself, or if you've been doing the Ramana Maharishi, who am I, and you're still suffering a lot, then maybe your heart's yearning is to actually do some emotion work, some shadow work, some emotional processing, Only you can decide that, and I'm not here to tell you what to do. All right, trusting your own intuition is the most important thing. But I know for me, when I was in that place where, man, just being slaughtered by reality in a way, like just so much resistance in my experience, and here I am just trying to meditate out of it constantly, which wasn't the goal, but that's what, if I was really honest with myself and I probed into the beliefs of why I was meditating in the first place, it's like, I just want to get rid of this unpleasantness of human existence. I just want to stop resisting. So if you're relating to any of this, I encourage you to keep listening, because I just want to talk a little bit about what's been happening for me, and it might open something up for you. I began considering the fact, and I noticed, like, I felt that resistance of not wanting to veer off or do something different, like engage in the story. I actually remember noticing that resistance of like, no, I mean, I'm a Vipassana meditator, or I'm this, so I can't do anything different than this until I get equanimity right or something. But ultimately my mind just sort of knew, it's like, you've got some unprocessed stuff that you've got to look at, Sam. You've got to engage the story. So slowly but surely, I sort of took baby steps and I weaned off the hardcore only doing meditation. And I started looking into different healing modalities. And I started looking at things like, what was it? What did I start with? I think just even like Carl Jung, like journaling, even like things like journaling, just like, oh, why did I act in the way that I did? And I would start journaling it out in a Notion document, which is a note-taking application. And, you know, just like, oh, I noticed I got angry when that person said this. Here's what I would wanted to have said to them. Here's what I wanted to have happened. Here's what advice I would want to give them to fix them. You know, just unfiltered journaling, just blasting it all out on paper. Or like, oh, I felt attraction to this woman. Like, what's this about? And then there was a little bit of shame there. Like, like just engaging the view of each of those mental states and just journaling it out. But just for the conciseness of this video and not to waste your time, because I do value your time, is then speeding forward a bit, I then landed on these modalities like focusing, somatic work, inquiring into the emotions, and actually tapping into the source code of the stored emotion in the body, and then seeing what it has to say. Actually identifying the resistance patterns that say things like, no, I don't want to feel this. Like things like anger. Like if I'd repressed anger, it's like, no, you can't express anger. The actual source code within the emotion body that was there to be seen, that practices that didn't actually engage the thought mechanisms within the identity of Sam couldn't tap into, because they didn't actually inquire into that substrate or that, you know, that material of consciousness or whatever. So it actually took going into those narratives and stories and beliefs to then dissolve and like open up. It's like, okay, the identity of Sam isn't this small now. It's like more like this, and it's permeable. There's gaps in it where now that it isn't so ridden with reactivity because of just trying to be with it as it is, but it's still like jar of hornets. It's more like, oh, it's permeable. I can get out, and it's vast openness for a bit, and then it's like in certain conditions. So doing the emotion work started to open up these little gaps here. And I'll tell you what really opened that up for me is doing work on doubt and shame. Not being good enough. Not doing the technique right. So actually going into the narrative of the one who's doubting, because all of these programs are trying to serve us in some way. For instance, doubt is so pervasive amongst pretty much every meditator. It's one of the core defilements, basically. And you can call it a defilement, but I like to look at it more as a protector, because it serves a role. Otherwise it wouldn't have adapted in our conscious experience to be so pervasive, right? And doubt to me is something that it creates a promise that you can do it better, that someone can help you, and that it's trying to aid you in doing something right so that you can get relief. So it serves an important function. And shame is similarly something that is also a helper, right? It's like our natural instinct is to not want to have shame. It's like, I got to get it away. There's something wrong. If we're really honest and we actually probe into beyond our beliefs and stuff, it's like, I can't feel this. But it's like, it's trying to protect you. Shame is just trying to keep you safe, right? So if I feel shame, then I'm not going to do the thing that's going to harm somebody else, which is ultimately going to enable me to get love, right? So these are protectors. Now, and I just want to wrap this up, that there's this, I'm not saying essentially that emotion work needs to become the new axiom in which you then base your experience upon, that you essentially now that you've opened your mind up to doing emotion work, that's like the only thing that you do. But what I'm suggesting is that emotion work can be allowed in this spiritual unfoldment, and we can allow engaging in the narrative so that we can open up the mind to be more permeable to insight, which is exactly what has happened for me. Where now there's this deep trust and intuition that comes online that just intelligently knows what I need to do in any given moment to open up and to let go more deeply into this crazy mystery of existence. So yeah, like there's a beautiful thing in a passage called Affirming Faith in Mind that my teacher read to me, and I made a post about this. I encourage you to check out my community tab on my YouTube page, which I just posted recently on the 1st of May 2023, if you're looking at this video in the future. And it says something in there that one line sticks out. Mind is mind because of things, and things are things because of mind. Which basically means that the only reason that we suffer in the first place is because we add mental labels to them, which can get very subtle. But I'll add to that as well, is that trusting your intuition to know when you need to let go of mental objects or hold on to them is critical. I think I remember in a talk, and this is one that can really stick with you. It's something like, if you're avoiding it, pick it up. But if it's light, let it down. If you're avoiding it, pick it up. If it's light, put it down. Which basically means that if you're avoiding something in your experience, let's say you're like meditating as a Vipassana meditator, or like you're doing the Who Am I, Ramana Maharishi, and then something so repressed comes up, and then you're just like, oh, I'm just with it as it is, and then meanwhile you're reacting around everybody and being an asshole, you're probably avoiding something. So it's like, maybe you could do some emotion work on that, process it, release that energy from the body. But if it's just like a light thing that you're just walking down the street and you brush by somebody, and it's just like, you know, that you feel what they're feeling as a sensitive human, which we all are innately in our core natural state, and you just feel like, say, they're feeling anger, and then it's like, okay, well, do you need to do a huge emotional process on that? I don't know, but this seems much easier to let go. But and I would let intuition be the gauge of that. And the best way I could describe intuition is the natural instinct that we have when we let go of all thought and concept. Where does your mind incline toward? So yeah, that's the dance, the weird paradoxical dance of emotion work and shadow work that has been, when emotion work's been allowed, it's been incredibly beneficial for me. And yeah, and I hope that if that resonates with you, you find some truth in it in your own experience. Something feels right, very right about that. Then don't shy away from the emotion work. It's totally safe. It's not going to de-accelerate your awakening or anything like that. If anything, it's probably going to help. So yeah, but trust yourself. Always trust yourself. Thanks, guys. Have a lovely evening or morning.